Bucknutters, welcome to the Bucknuts Morning Five here on Friday, September 9th, 2016. I am Dave Biddle. Very happy to be joined by Bucknuts contributor Brandon Castel. BCast, Ohio State is favored by 29 points, depending on where you look, over visiting Tulsa tomorrow at the Horseshoe. Other than a win, what do you want to see the most from the Buckeyes tomorrow, Brandon?
Well, I think we saw a lot of good things in the opener, and so I think you really want to see them build upon that and not take a step back. I think with so many young guys coming out in that first game, I know that Bowling Green isn't exactly a world beater, but I think I kind of expected them to get off to a little bit slower start. Now I know JT Barrett had the interception early on and kind of put them in a hole, but in my mind, I didn't expect them to come out and be clicking on all cylinders, at least in terms of the young receivers making big plays, the running game working early, the offensive line seeming to be on the same page. So we saw a lot of good things in the opener. Obviously, some things they got to clean up with some of the penalties and some of the other things that we saw. But I think you want to see more of the same. You want to see, can you continue that momentum? Can you get those guys involved? Can you continue to spread the football and run the football effectively, both inside and outside? Building up what this offense might look like for the rest of the season. And then defensively, this is a whole different animal facing Tulsa than what they saw last week. Tulsa can put points on the board in a hurry, and they have shown that if you go back to last season against some pretty big opponents last year, they put some points on the board against both Oklahoma when they played them early in the season. They put, I believe, 55 points on the board against Oklahoma. Or, I'm sorry, the defense gave up 55, but they put some points, I think 38 points on the board against Oklahoma, and then they put some points on the board against Virginia Tech as well in the bowl game. So, I think they're a team that can score. So you want to see what this defense brings to the table, I think, and they're going to get a much better test this week.
What is your score prediction for this one? I know, for those that didn't see our staff roundtable yesterday, I know we had it in there as well, but I'll give mine in a sec. What is your score prediction for tomorrow?
Yeah, great question. I think I settled in somewhere around, that 52, 55 to 27 mark. I think Ohio State will put some points on the board. I think this offense did a lot of really good things. They have to avoid mistakes. They have to avoid turnovers, but I do think they're going to put points on the board. As I mentioned earlier, this defense gave up 55 to Oklahoma when they played them last year. They gave up 52 to Virginia Tech when they played them in the bowl game. So, this defense has given up points, but they can score. And so we're really going to find out what Ohio State's defense is made of a little bit, maybe not on the same level as we will when they face Baker Mayfield, but, this defense can score. And Dane Evans can really throw the ball. He threw for 427 and 4 touchdowns in that game against Oklahoma. He threw for 374 and 3 against Virginia Tech. So they can throw the ball. So 27 might be a little light, but I do think that Ohio State will win the battle up front, and we'll see better pressure this week than what we saw in the first week.
I have Ohio State winning 52-20, but I have a lot of respect for this Tulsa offense too. I wonder if I'm selling them short a little bit because Ohio State's defense, while they played better than I expected against Bowling Green when you look at total yards for Bowling Green and points for Bowling Green. A lot of that was, I hate to say it, but Bowling Green dropping passes or James Kanapke when they did have, open receivers just flat out throwing terrible passes. And there wasn't much pass rush from the Buckeyes, which I excuse that a little bit because BG gets the ball out so quickly, but there were some bad angles. So I could see Tulsa scoring more than 20 and maybe making this more interesting than I'm predicting, but I'll stick with my prediction of 52-20 Buckeyes. One thing I am concerned about as well is the letdown factors. You alluded to this a little bit. I think it's easy to get up for the opener, even if it's Bowling Green, whoever it is. You've been hitting each other for, a month. It's fun to play the opener in front of 107,000 people. It doesn't matter who you're playing. And then week 3, it's going to be easy to get up for that game. This is a little bit of a trap game when, where are the emotions of the Buckeyes going to be? But I think when it's all said and done, thanks to JT Barrett, Urban Meyer, and the crew, it's going to be somewhere around 52-20 Buckeyes. Okay, moving on. Brandon, what are your expectations for the rest of the season? Not necessarily what could happen, just what do you expect will happen for the Buckeyes as far as, will they win the Big Ten championship? Do you think they'll make the playoffs? What do you expect will happen the rest of the season?
Way to put me on the spot early in the year with, one game under our belt. But, a lot, no, I love it. A lot depends on, what we what this team can become, what these young guys develop into. Is what we saw against Bowling Green going to be the true identity for this team? Are these guys really ready to play at that level? The Curtis Samuels, the Mike Webbers, Noah Brown, KJ Hill. We saw some guys make some really big plays and really flash. Dontre Wilson, in the opener. And if they're healthy and if those guys, can continue to make plays, I think Ohio State will be, the better team every time they take the field the rest of the year. And that says a lot because they're going to play some tough games. They're going to play, some tough road games at Michigan State and obviously end the season with Michigan and a much improved Michigan team from what we saw in the opener. We'll see what remains to be seen in terms of, their quarterback play, but certainly they've got some players, at other spots on the field. So in my mind, I think they can be as good, as anyone in the country. I think it's a little early to start projecting, quite that level of success after one game. I thought they would struggle with a few of these tough road games early in the year. You've got so many young guys and, we'll see. I think JT, like you said, JT Barrett, Urban Meyer have been around the block. I think having Barrett is huge. I know Urban Meyer made a comment the other day saying, if they didn't have Barrett and Elflein and Raekwon, this would have been one of the worst off seasons in Ohio State history. I don't quite buy that, but it is critical. If they were trying to break in a new quarterback, if Joe Burrow was taking over as the starting quarterback at Ohio State, I would have some serious concerns about their ability to compete for Big Ten championships and playoffs. But I think they'll be right in the hunt with JT Barrett. One key for me is that offensive line staying healthy. I know there's they have some depth in terms of some young guys who are coming on, but those five guys up front have got to stay healthy. JaMarco Jones, Pat Elflein, Billy Price in particular. They need those three guys to be healthy to really open the doors and kind of unlock the rest of this offense. So if they stay healthy, I do still think they're going to drop a game, at some point on the road, one of those tough road games, because this is such a young team and the moment we'll get to them or, maybe a couple miscues. But, I think they'll be right in the hunt at the end.
That's a great point about O-line depth. Urban Meyer has lamented that. Even when it's not really like he's directly asked about the backup offensive line, he'll find a way to mention he's not happy with the backup offensive line, but he likes the starters. And as you mentioned, Brandon, they cannot afford to lose a guy like Pat Elflein or Billy Price or JaMarco Jones or maybe even Mike Jordan or Isaiah Prince. Now, maybe they can afford to lose Isaiah Prince because they do like Brandon Bowen, but still, you don't want to lose any of those guys, especially those interior guys that you mentioned, and then JaMarco Jones. They just are not fans of the backup offensive lineman yet, with the exception of Brandon Bowen. It does seem like they like him. All right, real quick, I'll give my expectations real quick. I do think Ohio State's going to slip up at some point, but I do not think it's going to be against Michigan State or Michigan. They cannot afford that. But I think they're going to have one loss, but they are still going to be Big Ten champions. They're going to be 12-1, and they're going to make the playoffs. That's my expectation for this team. I look at what's in front of them. They really should be favored in every game. Maybe not at Oklahoma, but maybe they will be now that Oklahoma's lost. I don't know. That's at least going to be a very close point spread. But if they lose to Oklahoma, I think they'll run the table from there. If they beat Oklahoma, I could see a slip up somewhere, maybe at Wisconsin, at Penn State, something like that. But I do think in the end, Ohio State's going to find a way to win the Big Ten championship at 12-1 and get in the playoffs. Okay, moving on to defensive tackle. With the loss of Tracy Sprinkle and everything else you've seen, we already knew they were somewhat inexperienced, or a lot inexperienced at defensive tackle and young coming into the season. Brandon, is defensive tackle a concern of yours or no?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say it is definitely a concern of mine. It was a concern of mine heading into fall camp. I wasn't sure what, they were going to get from Tracy Sprinkle and Michael Hill. I looked at the end of last year when you lose the guys that they lost, especially a guy like Adolphus Washington. Joey Bosa played a lot inside for them last year. So in my mind, that was if you looked across the roster and you were trying to pinpoint areas maybe where they didn't quite have the talent or they didn't quite have at least the developed talent. I thought defensive tackle was really one of the kind of few places on the roster that jumped out at me. I just didn't see a guy like a Jonathan Hankins or Cam Hayward waiting to jump in and become, the next big defensive tackle. So now Sprinkle came on in fall camp and looked like he was going to be a really nice player for them this year. So I'm worried in the sense that you're putting some young guys in spots you didn't expect to put them into. So Devin Hamilton, Draymond Jones, those are the two guys that are going to have to step in, and they really haven't played, any meaningful football. I know they were both in the mix on Saturday, but they haven't played a snap of meaningful football yet. So that's a little bit concerning, I think, if you're looking at one area where maybe, there are some question marks going forward. I do think they'll have some options. They'll be able to slide a guy like Jalen Holmes over, especially with him being up to, 274, 275 this year. At some point, as he gets more in the mix, I would expect to see, Nick Bosa playing more inside, at least in, kind of those obvious passing situations. But yeah, I think especially early in the series, first, second down, when you've got to put some big guys on the field and you've got to stop the run, we saw Raekwon flying around making a lot of plays in the opener, but I didn't feel like the defensive line really dominated that game. I thought the linebackers played really well, but so to me, yeah, I think that's a concern, and maybe one of my biggest concerns along with offensive line depth going forward is just, if one of those guys comes on, like a bat out of hell, then I'm not going to be as worried. But until then, we don't really know what these guys have.
Outside linebacker Dante Booker is, of course, questionable for tomorrow's game, according to Urban Meyer, but I have serious doubts that he's going to play. From what I know, we'll have more about that in the boarding house today. So it looks like Joe Berger's going to get to start, fifth-year senior. He played well last week filling in for Booker. Interestingly, Jerome Baker has now moved over there as well to that will position. He had just been working at the walkout/Sam. But Chris Worley's been playing well there, and I was wondering, man, how can they leave Jerome Baker on the bench? I just feel like he's a future star. Well, now maybe it's temporary, or maybe he's just going to play both outside linebacker spots all year and just fill in. But at least for this game, it looks like Jerome Baker is going to get a lot of reps over there as Joe Berger's backup. And who knows, maybe Jerome Baker will start. I'm just assuming Joe Berger will start. But my question for you, are you expecting Jerome Baker's role to just increase as the season goes on, like bigger and bigger almost each game, or just what do you expect out of Jerome Baker?
Yeah, good question, and I do think you're going to see Joe Berger get the start. That would be my guess because he's a senior, he's a captain, he's a guy these guys look up to. That's not going to get you playing time necessarily, but obviously they left him in there and felt comfortable with him being, the guy who was out there when Booker went down in the opener. So I do think they're going to give him a shot. I thought he played pretty well. I think he's a guy who's going to be around the football and can make some plays against the run and on the outside. Obviously, he's nowhere near the athlete that Jerome Baker is, and obviously you're looking at a kid like Baker and potentially looking at a future star, a kid who, I thought going into fall camp was kind of that wild card of how the heck do you find a way to get this guy on the football field. And so I think a lot of people assume maybe he overtakes Chris Worley and his athleticism just is too much to keep him on the bench. And that didn't happen because I think Chris Worley has really come on and played nice and looks like he's going to be a nice player. But, yeah, it makes sense to move him over. I think you've got to find a way to get this guy on the field at some point, and this is a perfect opportunity. If you don't have to rush Dante Booker back from injury, and you can kind of, obviously he's going to be a little bit of a fish out of water if he hasn't practiced much, at the will linebacker spot. But this is a kid who's going to make plays. I think you can see that anytime you watch him practice, anytime you see him just run around on the field, he's going to make plays, and he's a heck of an athlete. So, yeah, I do think this is a great opportunity for both him and for Ohio State to find out, what do we got? Is this a kid we can't afford to leave on the bench? Maybe just move him around as much as possible and get him on the field, anywhere and anyhow that they can.
Last topic here on the lengthy Friday extravaganza, targeting. Everybody's favorite topic in college football or pro football, targeting. Nobody has any strong opinions on this.
Yeah.
Okay, my issue with this is, and I think there needs to be player safety. We could all agree on that, I would hope. Maybe there's somebody out there that doesn't care. But I think most people can agree that it's good that there's been this movement for player safety. I think we've overcorrected, though. I think in college football, my suggestion would be the player is called for targeting, and they review it, and it's a good call, 15 yards, and then you get what's basically taking a page out of soccer's book, a yellow card. You don't actually give them a yellow card, but it's like a warning. Okay, you have your one strike. It's a two-strike and you're out policy. You get called for targeting again in the same game, then you're ejected. You get the red card. I don't like this idea, B-Cast, of one guy, it could be, now if a guy is trying to take somebody's head off, it's different, but we just see so many times where it's like two guys lowering their head at the same time and a guy gets called for targeting, and it's a regular football play. I feel like there needs to be some type of buffer there where, okay, we're protecting the players, but we're not just ejecting a kid in the first quarter because of a natural football play. I think it should be 2 targeting penalties, then you're ejected. Your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, I somewhat agree with you. I do think that it's a little bit, it's a little bit crazy that it's kind of left up to the individual referees in each game to say within an instant, a moment's notice, one play that wasn't an obvious targeting where, the guy tried to really take someone's head off and just knock a guy out cold. They could make a judgment call and say, yep, that's targeting, and your entire game is over. I mean, obviously what happened with Joey Bosa, was in my mind one of the most egregious situations of this, where you got a kid playing in, one of the biggest games of the year, one of the biggest games in college football in the year, and, you make a judgment call on, really a play that was not very clear, clearly not a play where he's trying to knock a guy out cold, and, you toss him out of the game. And I think to me that's a bit much. I don't love the idea of the one and done kind of, you get 2 shots per game, because I think that kind of opens up to, well, I can kind of tee off until I get that initial yellow card. But I would like to see something maybe more in line with, maybe a combination of that and kind of the NBA technical rule of like, if you pick up a yellow card in game 1, that kind of carries over. So, if you get another one in, game 3, or maybe it's, I don't know how you do that, but as the season goes on, if you pick up multiple targeting penalties, then you start getting ejected for your targeting penalties, because I want to dissuade the guys who are out there doing this on a regular basis without punishing a kid who maybe, came in a little high with his hands, or, shoulder to the head on a play where the guy ducked his head down to avoid, high contact. And then there needs to be some recourse for a kid who's not out there as a known targeter. But yeah, I do think there should be some kind of strategy for how do we get this to, if you do develop that reputation, you're going to get tossed. But, I think we've gone to a crazy place in college where you barely have to touch the guy. I mean, you could touch him with your hands in the chest, and they can determine to use your body as a missile. And then I think a lot of people saw that game last night with Cam Newton just getting his bell rung time and time again, and you're thinking, wait a second, like I thought this was what we were trying to prevent with all these silly rules.
Yeah, that was crazy last night. The Panthers didn't want to take him out because they don't want him in the concussion protocol, but man, you would have thought somebody would have stopped play and say, listen, he just took a launching shot to the head. Might need to look at him for a second. But, the targeting debate will go on. I like your idea about the NBA too. That would be at least better than what we have now, where, a cumulative effect where you go forward, you get your second or your third down the line, you get ejected for that game. But yeah, they need to do something about the targeting penalty, and hopefully they will. They probably won't, but hopefully they will. Thanks as always for the wisdom of Brandon Castel. Really appreciate it, BCast. And thanks to all the listeners out there for tuning into the show. Keep it locked to Bucknuts for wall-to-wall coverage before and after the Ohio State-Tulsa game tomorrow. Let's hear a little Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.